Here's the thing nobody warned me about. The quiet phase, after both of you just stop. Not the dramatic kind where someone blocks someone. Just a mutual fade. The emotional gap that settles in like fog. I need to tell you something that changed everything for me. This disconnect you're experiencing right now, it's not actually the problem. It's the diagnosis. And what I'm about to share will flip your entire understanding of what's happening on both sides of this communication blackout. Look, I spent months trying to decode what was going on in my partner's head during our standoff. And what I discovered wasn't some relationship hack or magic formula. It was way simpler and way more unsettling than that. The person pulling away, they're not thinking about you the way you imagine. And you're about to go through a metamorphosis you didn't sign up for. Let me walk you through what's actually unfolding right now. Because I promise, it's the opposite of what your gut is telling you. The relief you're not expecting while you're probably spiraling, replaying every conversation in your head at 3 in the morning, analyzing tone and word choice. My partner was feeling something I never anticipated, a sense of exhale, like someone finally turned off a pressure valve. Here's the uncomfortable truth. When the communication stops from both directions, their entire nervous system registers it as sanctuary. All those invisible demands, the emotional heavy lifting they felt obligated to do, the vulnerability they were supposed to perform, it evaporates overnight. Psychologists who study attachment patterns call this the deactivation response. Their body literally treats emotional closeness like a biological alarm. Not because they're evil or calculated. It's automatic, hardwired. When things get too real, too intertwined, their internal alert system screams danger even when everything's technically fine. So when you stop initiating, their whole system finally settles. The warning bells stop. They can function again. But here's where it gets interesting, and where this quiet phase differs from every other rough patch you've weathered. The safety net just disappeared before. When there was distance, they still felt secure. Why? Because they knew you'd bridge it. You always did. You managed the emotional temperature. You closed the gap. They got to have stability without risk, connection without exposure, certainty without effort. Somewhere deep down, they counted on your consistency. But when you stop reaching across that divide, when the disconnect becomes genuinely mutual, that invisible insurance policy vanishes, and their sense of control starts cracking. This is when their relief stops feeling good, because something shifts that they weren't prepared for. Something that's going to reveal whether this person can actually handle genuine intimacy, or if they just liked having you orbit around them. The spiral begins over the following weeks. That initial exhale transforms into something more complicated. First comes curiosity, then bewilderment, then, creeping in slowly, anxiety. They start wondering why you've gone radio silent. The emotional gap that felt like freedom now feels like abandonment. Their mind begins wrestling with questions it never had to face when you were the pursuer. How come they haven't checked in? Did they actually walk away for good? Why isn't there any fight left? What if this time it's permanent? This bewilderment phase is when you'll catch the small tests. They'll peek at your WhatsApp status at odd hours. They'll ask mutual friends casual questions about you. They'll drop a message that seems harmless but is loaded with subtext. Been thinking about that coffee place we used to go to. How's everything with you? These aren't genuine reconnection attempts. They're probes. They're checking if you're still emotionally available, if the door is still ajar, if they can still access you without having to actually be vulnerable. And here's crucial. These little check-ins are untaid about missing you as a human being. They're about restoring control of the dynamic. They're confirming that their emotional safety net, which is you, hasn't completely disappeared. Because without your pursuit, they have to confront something absolutely terrifying for someone with this attachment style. The dread of becoming irrelevant. The dread of not registering in your world anymore. The dread that maybe they never mattered as much as they assumed. Meanwhile, on your side, but while they're spiraling through bewilderment and mounting anxiety, something radically different is happening in your world. And this divergence is what determines how everything resolves. Initially, the quiet phase is brutal. You're in pain. You're rewinding every interaction, every text exchange, Every moment you might have misread. You're questioning whether you should have stayed silent. Your anxious wiring is screaming at you to fix it, to message them, to keep the connection on life support no matter what it costs you. But then, gradually, something foundational starts to shift. Without the constant emotional gymnastics of keeping the relationship afloat, managing their moods, decoding their mixed signals, you start reclaiming energy you forgot you'd lost. You start breathing deeper. The quiet phase that felt like punishment starts feeling like refuge, like oxygen. You start rebuilding your sense of self-value that got slowly chipped away. Start seeing the dynamic with brutal clarity. How much work you were doing, how little was coming back, how you were constantly stabilizing their emotional weather while ignoring your own internal storms. And slowly, the disconnect stops being something you're surviving and becomes something you're actively choosing. It becomes its own form of resolution. This is where real detachment takes root, not the performative version, where you're secretly hoping they'll notice your absence and come rushing back. The authentic version, where you genuinely stop needing their validation because you finally validated yourself. And here's what's striking about this shift. While you're healing, expanding, rediscovering who you are outside this dynamic, they're tasting the emotional aftermath of their defense mechanisms, possibly for the first time. Isolation, second-guessing, wistfulness, the gnawing dread of being erased. They might replay moments with you. They might quietly ache for what you shared, but they feel too armored, too self-protective to reach out directly, because reaching out means confessing they need you. And for someone wired this way, that confession feels like dissolving their entire sense of self. The return, or the disappearing act, eventually, many people with this attachment pattern do circle back. A tentative text, an offhand comment on something you posted, a careful re-entry into your world. Not with apologies or explanations, not with emotional depth or rawness, but with another test to see if the door is still unlocked. They're checking if you're still the same person who used to chase, who used to accept scraps, who used to tolerate inconsistency. But here's what makes this moment different from every previous cycle. By now, you're not caught in their patterns anymore. The distance doesn't feel mysterious or compelling. It feels routine. You can see it for exactly what it is. A protection strategy. A fear of closeness, masquerading as independence and self-reliance. And this is where you face the most significant crossroads. Not based on wishful thinking. Not based on their potential. Not based on who they might become, with enough patience. But based on who they're proving themselves to be right now, in this moment, through their actual behavior. When someone with this attachment style, who's genuinely doing internal work, reaches out after the quiet phase, there's ownership present. They name the distance. They share what they've been processing. They might not have everything figured out, and they might still be scared, but they demonstrate through their actions that they're capable of stepping toward you even when it's profoundly uncomfortable. But if they reach out with vague pleasantries, with surface-level, small talk that leads nowhere, with carefully sanitized conversations that dodge anything real, that's giving you your answer in real time, what they're communicating is this: I can miss you. I can reminisce about us. I can feel sentimental about what we had, but I'm not willing to do the uncomfortable, messy work of actually showing up with authenticity. And no amount of waiting, no amount of space, no amount of hope is going to alter that core reality. Because this isn't about deploying the right strategy or perfect timing. This is about capacity. This is about whether they possess the emotional bandwidth and willingness to do what genuine intimacy requires. Your real power, your actual strength emerges when you stop initiating contact, not as a manipulation tactic to make them miss you, but because you've genuinely healed to the point where you don't need their validation anymore. Your quiet becomes a declaration of authentic emotional autonomy. And that's exactly what penetrates their defenses in a way pursuit never could. For some people, this becomes a legitimate awakening that jumpstarts their growth journey. They recognize what they've lost. They start examining their patterns. They begin doing the uncomfortable internal work. They start understanding that intimacy doesn't actually mean losing themselves. For others, they simply redirect into fresh distractions. A new relationship, burying themselves in their career, new hobbies, new locations, anything to avoid feeling what the disconnect is trying to teach them. And that's not your failing. That's not something you could have prevented. That's their decision, their journey, their accountability. The mirror effect. Either way, the quiet phase becomes the mirror that exposes both your reality and theirs. It shows you who you're evolving into without them, and it shows them who they are without someone else managing their emotional landscape. So here's where you're standing right now. You're in the disconnect. And the real question isn't whether they'll eventually reach back out. The real question is, who are you becoming during this quiet phase? Are you using this time to genuinely heal, to build actual boundaries you'll honor, to reconstruct the self-worth that got damaged? Or are you sitting in a disconnect, barely breathing, waiting for them to validate you by returning? Because ultimately, what shapes your future has nothing to do with who breaks the silence first. It's about who actually grows, who actually evolves, who actually does the work. For you, the quiet phase can become a forge for self-worth and emotional sovereignty, a space where you remember who you were before this relationship and discover who you're becoming beyond it. For them, it becomes a reckoning with fear and unprocessed wounds, a decision point between repeating familiar cycles or finally attempting something different. The disconnect doesn't destroy authentic connection. It simply exposes whether the foundation was solid enough to exist without someone constantly pursuing, persuading, and overcompensating. And if it wasn't solid enough to endure without you carrying the entire weight, then what you're releasing isn't actually love. It's the draining, spirit-exhausting job of trying to convince someone to choose you. What happens next? So what actually unfolds when both you and my partner enter complete communication blackout? You get to uncover who you are without them. You get to discover what you're capable of when you're not investing all your energy into managing someone else's intimacy fears. You get to experience what it feels like to prioritize yourself first. And that discovery, that metamorphosis, that reclamation of your own existence is the most powerful outcome imaginable. Not just for this relationship, but for every relationship you'll navigate going forward. Because you're absorbing the most critical lesson. You can't love someone into healing. You can't sacrifice yourself into making someone ready. You can't pursue someone into choosing you. Authentic love doesn't demand that you minimize yourself, accept scraps, or live in constant anxiety about whether you're too much or not enough. Authentic love meets you where you are. It shows up reliably. It does the work even when it's uncomfortable. And if this quiet phase is teaching you to stop accepting anything less than that, then it's not an ending. It's a beginning. If this resonated with your experience, I'd appreciate you engaging with this content. It helps me understand what's actually landing and helps this perspective reach others navigating similar situations. And remember, the disconnect isn't hollow. It's full of your transformation.